women are able to demonstrate the most valuable leadership skills. So empathy, emotional intelligence particularly, are the skills that are seen as the most valuable, the most powerful.
Was there a defining moment that inspired you to start your business?
It wasn't so much one moment as a series of moments and a series of realizations over time. I had recently left my role at Amazon, where I was leading a marketing team at Prime Video. And while I was doing some consulting and some freelance work, I was spending time thinking about what do I want to do in the long term. And what I do now really is this intersection between the things that I care about very deeply, which is women having more influence, women being at the seats of power, women being able to inform decision making, and using the superpowers that I have in order to help them get there. So that's kind of where those things have come together. And I had been doing a lot of reflection around my own experience in the spaces that I'd been in, which were all male dominated, particularly when you got to a senior leadership level. This had a knock-on impact on my beliefs, on what I could do, what my abilities were. There was also a style of leadership that was one that I was seeing most commonly, which didn't really align with the core skills that I had as a woman, but also a lot of the core skills that other women have. And we're not really seeing those kind of skills being replicated at a senior level. And that also has an impact on how well you believe that you're able to get there and that you have the same right and the same ability to sit in these spaces of power. So I did a lot of work on my own limiting beliefs, the blocks that I had around who I was, who I should be, what I wanted, who am I really? And that in and of itself has been a really inspiring and revelatory process for me that has enabled me now to do what I do. And I really just want other women to be able to cast off this old stuff too, because I want more for women. I think it's more crucial now than ever that women have got more influence, more confidence, more money. All of these things I think are critical. So I know that it's completely possible to do because I've done it myself. And that's what I want to bring to other women.
Do you believe businesses are doing enough to support their female employees, and why?
Short answer is no, they're not. The reality is that women are able to demonstrate the most valuable leadership skills. So empathy, emotional intelligence particularly, are the skills that are seen as the most valuable, the most powerful. And all of the research supports the fact that women typically demonstrate these better than men do. And there's a lot of history around that. There's a lot of our social programming, our conditioning. It's not necessarily about our natural ability, but that's where we are. Businesses with more women in senior positions make more money, they perform better, their teams are happier. And yet only 1 in 5 senior leaders is a woman. So we know that women are really good at it. We know that it has this knock-on effect through to the bottom line, past all your people, and yet we still don't have enough women. So that in and of itself should tell us no, businesses are not doing enough. There are obviously some businesses that are doing well, and definitely there are more improvements being made. I think the conversations are being had, the awareness is there, but it is still slow. In terms of the why, there are a variety of different things, and they'll all be different depending on what the business is and depending on what's going on. But we've historically got one type of person sitting in the seats of power and decision making, and that limits perspective, and that limits the ability to embrace things which are different, and there's an assumption that, well, this is the way that good leadership is, and this is the way that we need to be. So that's just a kind of historical impact. There can be the threat that comes with change and the fear that comes from change. And I know that particularly post-pandemic, a lot of businesses are being resistant to things around flexibility. Well, if we're more flexible for you, do we have to do that for everyone? Are people going to be skiving off work and not doing anything properly? And I think people have got really comfortable, particularly those who have succeeded in these spaces. They've got very comfortable with, this is how it is, and therefore that's how it has to be. And we have to hustle, we have to work hard, we have to stress, we have to sit in this very particular way of behaving. And if we're not doing that, we're not working hard enough, we don't deserve it. If we're not really stressed, we're not really succeeding. And I think there can be a fear and a threat to things being different. There being a possibility for a different way of leading, a different way of thriving. So I think that can sometimes be it. There's just that slightly more primal thing of, oh God, I don't want to have to change. I think there's also a lot of people just don't think it's really an issue. There's blinders on. People will think that they're just hiring based on the best person and not necessarily looking at all of the additional factors that are influencing it, and where the best person might actually still not be able to get in front of you for an interview, let alone actually get the job. So there's that, I think. I think there's also a reluctance to admitting the impact of privilege, and that's not just gender-based, but I think that's across the board. I think we're all collectively conditioned into seeing a particular type of person as a leader. We've all got our own baked-in biases and baked-in conditioning around that when we think about a leader, and there's still this assumption that that is what we need to be in order to fit that, which we all have to undo and we all have to reflect on, but that can also take a little bit of time. Sometimes there's a reluctance to do the work, whether it's that it's hard, I don't have time. Sometimes it's hard and I'm worried I'll get it wrong. That's a really big blocker for people, particularly people who are in more senior positions, thinking, God, I've got to do everything and I've got to do it all perfectly and I've got to get it right first time, rather than looking at how can I just start. And then the underpinning of a lot of it is sexism, just plain and simple. This assumption that women cannot do these things as well as men. This assumption that there's no female talent. This assumption that men are in these positions and they are the only ones who deserve to be there. And if women deserve to be there, they would be. This assumption that the way that women might want to work, the way that women might need to approach things like flexibility, because obviously women are typically carrying greater burdens when it comes to childcare, when it comes to home life, and so on and so forth. And it's just thinking that women don't deserve to have a seat at those tables in a lot of situations as well.
How can businesses empower all employees and close the female leadership gap?
I wish I had a magic answer for this question. I do. I wish there was one, and the truth is that there isn't. I think there's a couple of sort of fundamentals that for me apply broadly. The first one is we need to not see this as just a women problem. This is something for everyone to solve. Men hold more seats of power, therefore men will be able to have a bigger influence on this. And so if you are a man who is in a position of power, who recognizes that this is something that needs to be changed, you've got the ability to be an ally, you've got the ability to champion women. And how can you really engage in that process? We do have this tendency to think, well, women just need to be more confident. Women just need to get over their imposter syndrome. Women just need to ask for what they want. And if it was that simple, we'd be there. Like, women have been doing this stuff for a really long time. So we really need to see this as an everybody challenge. I think underneath that, we all have to be open to hearing things that we don't like and being challenged. And it might be that actually, if you've got a senior leadership team who needs to start having that openness and maybe struggle with it, how can you support them with getting that? How can you support them with the right coaching, mentoring, training, whatever it might be, to enable them to hold those spaces for other people? Because sometimes we're asking people to make quite big shifts, and you don't want to just throw them in. They're not going to succeed at that. So how can you set people up for success in the best possible way? Creating a culture from the top, I think, is absolutely critical. So you really need to be clear from the most senior point in your business all the way through. And from the point that somebody is writing a job spec through to the point that they're getting promotion and making it to the top, end to end, that you've got a culture that is empowering employees, that is supporting women. Supporting and nurturing existing female talent is critical. More women will come into the pipeline if they see more women in senior positions, and that's just a key thing. And businesses which have a greater pipeline of women will also perform better versus a business that has one female executive and a very limited pipeline. So this is something that's also key. Whether you do that through mentoring schemes, whether you do that again through coaching, through training, support across the business, pay women better, pay women the same as men for the job that they're doing. Make sure that you've got women in senior level positions. Really pay attention to things like your gender pay. Don't make an excuse for your gender pay gap. Fix it. Just pay us. Pay us what we're worth. This is something that's really key as well. Be open to things being more flexible. Be open to giving women, and to be honest, to be giving everybody things that might be slightly different, and make that type of thing, make flexibility something that is open to everybody, not just women. Because actually that's helping you to create another kind of leveling of the playing field. If it's something that is not seen as like that's just a women's thing, this is an everybody thing. I think, as I said, I think get support when it's hard. Be okay with it maybe being a little bit hard. Admit where you have gaps. Admit where you need some help. Admit where you need some additional knowledge. I think that's really important too. And another really critical thing for me is like, ask women what they need and then give it to them. And that sounds incredibly simple, but it's remarkable the number of places where there are assumptions made about why women aren't doing something, why there aren't more women in leadership. We want more women in leadership, but they're stalling at this level and we just don't know why. We think it's just a confidence thing. Ask them why. And when they tell you, make plans to change it and make plans to fix it. And just that will start to have an impact if that's actually what you're open to hearing. And the other thing that I think is really important to note is we have to see this as a fully intersectional problem and an intersectional challenge that we all have to play a part in solving. So this isn't just for white women to succeed. This is for all women to succeed. And in the same way that we want men to be open to being challenged and to hearing about their privilege and to what they need to do to make space for us as women who hold privilege. So as a white woman, how can you be open to hearing from women across other minority groups about where things might be challenging and what you can do to be a better ally and what you can do to be a better help? Because we all have to be equal for this to be effective. And I think that's something that's really important as well, that we not lose sight of the need for us to be super supportive across the board and lift one another up all together.
You help women overcome their fear of doing inner work. What does inner work mean?
Inner work is, for me, it's about really exploring what's going on with you and getting to know yourself better. So for a start, it's just being in a place where you can understand how you are feeling. What are the contributing factors? Being able to identify that. And sometimes it means identifying things that might be uncomfortable to admit or uncomfortable to actually face. And what can sometimes happen is that someone will say, I know I've got this thing and I know where it comes from, but I'm not willing to face it. I'm just going to ignore it. And there's sometimes this worry that actually by doing some work, we're going to have to relive them and face them. We might end up having to face different contexts about a situation and challenge our beliefs about the way that something has always been. That can sometimes be uncomfortable. So I try and make sure that women don't always have to go back and relive that if they don't want to. There are ways to process these kind of stuck emotions and let them go without having to go back through that. And it's really important that we're in a space where we feel like we're safe and that we can be vulnerable so that we can actually move through this stuff, because on the other side is where things get much lighter and brighter. I think also for a lot of women that I speak to, there can be a reluctance just to be selfish, is what they see as being selfish. When you were doing something where you are thinking about yourself or talking about yourself, a lot of women really struggle with that notion, this idea of, God, I'm going to spend an hour with somebody talking about myself. I can't do that. They're going to be so bored. I never talk about myself. I never think about my feelings because I'm so busy thinking about other people. And there can sometimes be a bit of resistance to it from that point of view as well. So I really help support women into this space of, it's okay for you to have time where you are thinking about what's going on with you and where you are actually, it's not selfish to focus on you for a little bit of time.